Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. It is wonderful to have you all here. Today we're going to be doing our guided notes for section 10.2, finding arc measures. This is Mr. P, and let's go ahead and take a look at it. So your central angle is an angle whose vertex is in the center of a circle, like this. This 59 degrees here is a central angle. A circular arc is a portion of a circle. That's this guy right here. That's just the little bit of outside there. A minor arc. So if the measure of angle AC or the measure of angle ACB is less than 180 degrees, then the points on the circle C that lie on the interior of ACB form a minor arc, like this. Now it will be written as arc AB, from A to B. The major arc, though, the points of circle C that do not lie in the minor arc or AB or major arc with endpoints A and B, major arc ADB, is written as ADB. So in order to say that it's the small arc, you would say arc AB. In order to say it's the big arc, you'd have to go A and then to another point on the outside, D to B, because that tells you which direction to go. A semicircle is an arc with endpoints that are the endpoints of a diameter, that is half a circle. The measure of an arc is the measure of its central angle, that is that we can talk about the outside as how many degrees there are. Adjacent arcs, when two arcs intersect at exactly one point, they are adjacent to each other. So arc AB is right next to arc BC. You could also think of that as arcs created by adjacent angles. Let's call that center D. ADB would be next to BDC, adjacent to it. Finally, similar arcs that have the same measure, because more on their length later. There's some theorems here. Arc addition postulate. The measure of an arc formed by two adjacent arcs is the sum of the measures of the two arcs. That makes sense. From A to B to C is the same as A to B plus B to C. That makes sense. Congruent circles theorem. Two circles are congruent circles if and only if they have the same radius. That is, two circles can only be the same size if their radii are the same. That makes sense. A bigger radius would give you a bigger circle. A smaller radius would give you a smaller circle. Congruent central angle theorem. In the same circle or in congruent circles, two minor arcs are congruent if and only if their corresponding central angles are congruent. That is, because the thing is that we might be able to talk about the measure of these, like how many degrees are in there, but their actual lengths are only congruent if the angles are congruent. If that's a congruent circle or the circle within itself. Similar circles theorem, all circles are similar. And we'll get to that in but a moment. Finding arc measures. So in the circle, PR and QR are diameters. So PR and QR, P to R, and that's a typo. Q to R is not a diameter. Q to S is a diameter. QS is another diameter. Okay? Identify whether the arc is a major arc, minor arc, or semicircle, and find its measure. Q to R to S. Q to R to S. So we would say that that is a semicircle. Because it takes up half of the circle. And that would be 180 degrees. Because that's half of your circle. Now T to S, that's a minor arc. Because it does not pass something behind it. Now if it was TPS, it would go the other way. Minor arc, but it's TS. So minor arc. And its measure, well, PR, the arc PTR is 180 degrees, and the arc PT is 64, arc SR is 42. So to find TS, we can do 180 subtract 64, and then from that, well, 180 minus 64, because that's the measure of arc PT, that is 116, from which we are going to take 42 degrees, because that's the measure of SR, and that's 74. which means that this measure is 74 degrees. Arc TS is 74 degrees in measure. TPS, T to P to S. Now look at that. That goes all the way around the circle the other way, almost, because it stops with TS. Now, the total number of degrees in a whole circle is 360, which means that this measure is the 360 take away that 74. By the way, that's a major arc. (360 minus 74 is 286. That is not 286. That's 286 degrees. Okay, now from P to Q, right here, how can we find that? Well, first of all, that's a minor arc. Some minor arcs have major consequences. For example, crockpots in This Is Us, or so I am told. Sorry, I'll just give you a second to cry. I understand that crockpots make people cry now because of that show. Anyway, that's this minor arc right here, this P to Q. And we'll notice that QPS is 180 degrees because that's a semicircle. So we need to take 180 and we need to take away the 74, that's my arc TS, and take away 64, which is my arc PT. And 180 minus 74 minus 64 is 42 degrees. And there you have it. Are they semicircles, minor arcs, major arcs, and what are their measures?